and welcome to Grow Big Red. I'm John FECH with the University of Nebraska Extension Division, and today we're going to talk about fall is for planting. Now, fall is for planting a lot of different things, and most of the things we plant involve the same types of techniques, but there are differences, of course, according to what we are going to plant. People often ask me, why fall? Why is fall for planting? Really, I'm kind of tired of the plants by the time fall rolls around. Spring is for planting. Well, and really, from a horticulturist standpoint, fall is for planting because it's the beginning of a growing season. We have 2, 3, sometimes up into 3.5 good months of growing conditions, depending on the fall. But on the average, around 3 months of good growing conditions in September, October, and into November, where the temperatures are cool. The rainfall is nice, usually nice and light, kind of in that 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch range. They still get a lot of sunny conditions. And then what happens is those are all good growing conditions for most plants. Then we take a brief rest over the, some may argue here in the Midwest that it's a little bit longer than brief. But then April rolls around and the plants start growing again. So we're pretty much talking about perennial plants for the most part, although if you had started in July and August, you could be talking about vegetable plants as well. But at this point, we're talking about ornamental perennial plants. And then the plants start to grow again. You get a great advantage of those establishing a root system this fall. If you try to do that in the spring, the soils are cooler, they're wetter, they're hard to plant into, and we got a lot of variability in terms of those fluctuations. In the fall, things are a little bit more stable, and we have a little bit better growing conditions. So that's why fall. And there are a lot of things that we can put in the ground in the fall that do really well. With all these plants, though, soil preparation is really important. And that involves a few things. First of all, we've got to get something to loosen up the soil. And really a great tool for that is this type of pitchfork. There are a couple of different types. If the soil is really compacted, this 4-pronged one works really well, because then you can do sort of a scoop and dump approach where you dig it in the ground, lift it up, and drop it back down again. And that works really well for loosening our compacted soils. So first-time homeowners, this is exactly what you're going to want to do. And even if you've got an area that hasn't been moved or turned or dealt with for a while, this works really well. The other types of pitchforks are really more compost turners, and you'll see about 8 or so thinner prongs that come down, and they work really well for soils that have been worked in the spring. But if you haven't done much other than just maybe looking at a patch of weeds, this is the tool you want to use. And then, of course, for the planting itself, you're going to want to use a sod spade. This works really well for planting in the fall. It's got a nice sharp edge on it, and it really does a good job of planting in areas, especially if we're going to be planting smaller plant material. It does a nice job of using it after the pitchfork has been used to scoop, and then this does a good job of creating individual planting holes. Now, if you're a little bit of a lazy gardener, and nothing wrong with admitting you might be, then this works really well for planting small plants. It's a bulb planter, but you can even put in small perennials with it, and it's really just a plunk, turn, and pull out. If you've ever watched, if you think back to the movie Caddyshack, you saw the gopher being chased around in the holes that were changed by the greenkeeper. And if you're even a golfer today, you see greenkeepers and golf course superintendents doing this, where they'll just dig a hole with a special tool, much like this, only with a long handle. So it just does a small area. So if you're just going to pop in small bulbs, this might be the ticket for you too. But these 3 tools work really well. The next consideration is right plant, right place. In all of horticulture, we talk about right plant, right place. And this is where you think about soil and sun and a variety of different factors, drainage. And we don't want to be putting in shady plants in the sun and sunny plants in the shade. So this is really, really important. Drainage is always important. Soil conditions, wind speed, all of these different factors are really important when you're talking about putting the right plant in the right place. It's important to read the care tag and just look at the preferences. For example, a plant like this will always have a care tag where you look at the different conditions where it does well. And if there are special conditions or special considerations, those are well noted on the care tag itself. And you always want to consult that when you're buying a plant, either in person at a local garden center or online. Either way, you're going to see a set of conditions. If you don't see those set of conditions or a set of specific instructions, move on. Select some other vendor to buy your plants from, because that's what you really need to know to have success. Right plant, right place. Speaking of plants like this, especially when you're dealing with already growing plants, plants that have already put out some roots and shoots, the big thing is, yes, be wowed and be excited by the foliage and the flowers, which of course you look at a plant like this, like a New England aster, it's exciting. I mean, those colors are vibrant. But don't be just thinking about that. Also be thinking about the roots. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, the roots are much more important, getting the roots established. So the steps here are squeeze the plant pot a little bit, and then grab here by the base and tease this out of the pot and look at the roots. And as I look at this, I see roots well established on the outside of the periphery of the plant mass, and a few underneath here. And these are the ones that might be a little bit problematic. So you just might want to tease these open a little bit. And as I do that, I really don't see a ton of roots there. If we saw really thick woody roots, or a lot of them, a lot more of them spiraling around, that would be a big concern. But in this case, I think I'm okay. When I go to plant this, I'll just simply do a little bit more of that. Maybe I'll take the pitchfork and kind of loosen them just a little bit. But this is certainly something to be done. It's not real exciting to be done, but it's really important for success. And if you don't look at the roots, you might be disappointed after a little bit of time goes by, because you're not going to have a chance to fix that later. After you put the pot in the ground and take the pot loose and put the roots in the ground, you're not going to have any chance to fix that later. That's a one-time opportunity for success, is to do that, and so that works out well for you. So uncoil the roots, spread them out, and go from there. All right, the next thing to think about is the depth of planting. So you've prepared the soil and you've loosened it. Sometimes putting in a little bit of compost is a good idea, especially again if you're planting into heavy clay soil and you haven't done much with it. The compost, which is really just a collection of roots and old shoots, you can even still see some leaves that haven't totally decomposed, has kind of a nice earthy smell to it. This is like black gold. This is the wonderful thing that if you're planting into heavy clay, you're in a new part of the metro area, and it's not a very fertile soil, it's hard to do the digging, then this is the ticket. This is what you want to work in with that scoop and dump technique, is to work in some compost. That's going to really be helpful. You can make compost or you can buy it. Either way, it works out fine. Cottonburg compost, GRO, just a variety of different things that you can use in order to loosen up the soil. So the planting depth is what I'm talking about. After you've prepared the soil and got it enriched with a little bit of compost, the planting depth is the next thing. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. Again, you got to take this off. Sometimes we get the questions of, do you take the pot off or not? And yes, you absolutely do. But if I can show you this right here, the planting depth is not right here, it's not up here. It's right here at the base of where the stem comes out of the ground. And I'm going to stick my finger in and then pull it out so you can see where it was. Or maybe I'll use my small finger, my pinky finger, to show you. You're going to want to take this top root and have those be at the soil line. And this would be the case for shrubs, for trees, for perennials like this, anything that has an above ground part of the plant at this time of the year. Is you're going to want to just plant this right at soil grade. And that becomes really important so that the plant is able to set out new roots and isn't planted too deeply or too high. If it's planted too deep, it's going to have problems with that not enough oxygen. If it's planted too high, especially with fall planting, you're going to have trouble with the plant drying out and desiccating, and those roots drying out over winter. Another example that I could think of is with bulbs. Bulbs need to be planted under the ground, not very close to the top soil surface. If you're planting vegetables, almost all of those need to be planted near the soil surface, right kind of at the soil surface from seeds or from transplants. Again, the same kind of thing. But bulbs need to be planted deeply, and each one is planted a little bit deeper than others. If you're not sure how deep to plant something, I'll give you a general guideline. Plant it about 3 times the depth of the width of the bulb. So in this case, the bulb is about, oh, it's almost 2 inches deep, 2 inches wide. We'll plant it 6 inches deep. But again, there will be instructions on the bulb package as to how deep to plant them. On average, we plant daffodils about 7 inches deep, tulips 5 to 6 inches deep, grape hyacinths about 4 inches deep, and crocus and other plants like that probably about 2 inches deep. So everyone is slightly different, and you'll get instructions on how deep to plant that right here on the base of the packaging itself. And again, if you don't, you can find that information out. You can call us at the extension office. We'll help you with that information. There's always this issue of upside down or right side up when it comes to tulips. And while it isn't a terrible error in the success of the planting to plant it upside down, because eventually what will happen is the shoot will come out and turn up. But it's always a little bit of a head start if you can put the tip or the pointy end up. All the roots will come out of this basal plate, and they will provide new roots at that point. While you're doing this, you also might want to just inspect them and see if they're soft and spongy. These are all nice and firm, and I can poke them with my finger and not have any soft spots on there. They can have these little bumps, and all that is no problem at all. It's just part of the way the bulb grows. But if they're soft, that's a problem. Now the papery part is always a problem, is always thought to be a problem too, where these papery scales are here, where, oh, is my bulb damaged? No, they're not damaged at all. Again, it's just the way the bulb grows. So it's not a concern there at all. Now we do have a lot of choices. I've already talked about some of the bulbs. We've also referred to some of the perennials, but there are other things you can plant too. All trees and shrubs are great to plant in the fall. They just, again, get that root system off to a good start. If you're still wanting to do this and you're going to do this right away, we can still also do any seeding of your lawns. Sodding of lawns can happen almost all the way up through well, for sure all the way up to Halloween and maybe even up to Thanksgiving. The sodding already has an established root system. Get that off the ground and get it ready to go. So lots and lots of different plant choices here in the fall. Again, it's one of those things where you just want to take advantage of the weather conditions that fall presents us with. And the final thing I want to talk about is after planting care. And first of all, it's obvious, but we want to make sure that after we put a plant in the ground that it's watered well. Plants will dry out, roots will dry out if we're not planting well. There's really not a lot of need, if any need, for fertilizer in the fall. And because we want those roots to establish themselves, we don't want to stunt them by burning them with foliar or with a root fertilizer. So hold off on any fertilization until the spring after planting, and that way you're going to be in good shape. All right. Well, hopefully I've given you some good inspiration and some good advice on doing some planting here in the fall. Lots of opportunities for you. If you have more questions, contact one of the Master Gardeners here, 444-7804, or just stop by. We're at 80th and West Center Road on the south side of Center Street, and we'd love to see you. I'm John FECH with Nebraska Extension.
Hi, my name's Jody Green. I am an urban entomologist and an extension educator with the Nebraska Extension in Douglas and Sarpy counties. And today we are going to talk about spiders. So if you live in Nebraska and you've been outside at all, you will see that there are a lot of spiders this time of year. Not necessarily more than normal, but it seems like they had a good survival. And right now is also the time of year that they're selling a lot of Halloween things. So you may see things like this, a lot of different spider paraphernalia. And it may be a little bit of a pet peeve for entomologists and arachnologists that they are not always represented in the right way, because those spiders are there for the frightening, scary Halloween theme. A lot of them that we see in real life are actually quite beneficial in our landscapes. And we'll also talk about how to keep them out of your house, because though they're beneficial, a lot of times we don't want them in our homes. So let's talk about some of the spiders that we are seeing outside, because believe it or not, the diversity in Spiderland is pretty great. So speaking of what may be outside, I've been asked a lot about the big yellow garden spider. I don't have a sample here today, but those are called Argiope spiders. They are a type of garden spider and a type of orb weaver. And what they do is spin those flat spiral type webs. So unlike the ones that you'll see in stores, but very classic spider web, you'll see something like this. So what they do is they use their silk and they set out anchor lines, and then they'll set out different parts of the frame, and then they'll send out the radial, so the ones that go from the middle to the sides. And then what they do is they create a spiral starting from the outside, and they keep going in. And people always ask how spiders don't get stuck in their own web, but it is possible. So they walk on there very carefully, and they know which ones are the sticky threads. These orb weavers are passive hunters, so that means they just sit and wait. So you'll often see an orb weaver, let's just say this was an orb weaver, sitting in her web like this, just waiting for prey, usually flying insects, to fly in there and get caught, and then she will wrap it up in silk and feed on it. Here is the orb weaver that I took from my garden today. She's a little bit rolled up, but some orb weavers actually consume their silk and make a new web each night. So they don't want to waste that protein and all the silk, and so they'll do that. And I know that some webs are strong enough that they can catch a cicada in there. So that's a pretty good meal for an orb weaver. But orb weavers have that bulbous, kind of round abdomen, and that's how you can tell it's an orb weaver. And anything makes that type of spiral web could also be considered a type of orb weaver. Some of the other spiders that we see right now are the grass spiders. Sometimes we call them funnel weavers because they've got this flat sheet, and what happens is that insects or prey will fall into that sheet, and it's not very sticky, but they'll run out and they'll grab that, that prey. And I have a sample right here. So these are grass spiders. Often you can't see them because they're in that funnel. So it's a flat sheet web with a funnel at the end or the side or even the center, but they're hidden in there. And sometimes they'll actually use pieces of your home or structure and hide in there. So this one actually I found, and its end of the funnel was at the end of a rolled up leaf in the garden. But these are very prominent right now, and when you look at them, you may think that they're a wolf spider, but wolf spiders don't spin webs as well. They have their spinnerets, or where their silk comes from, is very prominent and very long. Some other spiders that you may see are cobweb spiders, and I've got one right here. They spin messy webs, and you can see them there, and they often have a bunch of egg cases in there, or egg sacs. They're little brown, little balls. So spiders all have 2 body parts. They've got 4 pairs of legs. They're able to produce silk, and they do have venom. People worry that spiders are poisonous. However, they're not poisonous. Nothing is poisonous unless you eat it or lick it. Spiders are venomous, but just because they're venomous doesn't mean that A, that the venom is toxic to people, and B, that they are actually going to bite you or they're aggressive. So that's another myth about spiders. When you may see a web that has a spider-looking thing in it, well, spiders are a type of arthropod, and all arthropods have to shed their exoskeleton in order to grow. We do not have tarantulas in Nebraska, but they do. I do have a good example here of a tarantula molt. And so every time the tarantula needs to grow, it will shed its exoskeleton. So this is when it was its first molt, and this is its second molt. And the tarantula that I have has molted, I think, 5 times, and I'll show you the last molt that I had. And so you can see that she has gotten considerably bigger since I've got her. And this happens to insects, and this happens to all spiders. So you may see something that looks rather large, but it may not be a spider at all. It may be its exoskeleton, and sometimes if you don't clean those corners of your house, you may see those hanging there. So we do recommend taking down those webs and vacuuming those corners. It will get rid of some of the insects that spiders feed on, and will also take down the webs. So when we talk about management of spiders, because it's going to be management. We want to keep them outside, but we don't necessarily want to kill them. There are some things that you can do. We've got the easiest and non-toxic way to control spiders is to actually use glue boards. And so what these are sticky cardboard monitors that you can get in the hardware store or the grocery store. They may say, you know, spider trap, it may say cockroach trap, it doesn't matter. It is a cardboard piece that can be manipulated and hidden on the floor and in corners, and it can catch, you know, spiders or any insects that are going to be crawling on the ground. And what you want to do is use those as a tool. So for spiders, they are good traps, but also if you're trying to figure out where they're coming in from, because that's usually where the problem is, that they have some access to come in from outside. You can roll them up, and there's usually a way to connect them. Oh yeah, you'd want to take the covering off, and that is very sticky glue. If you do end up getting stuck to it, vegetable or mineral oil should be able to take that off, but it's got to be sticky to catch what you need. So you can wrap that up like that, and what you want to do is put that flush against the wall, and you want to put that in a dark corner, or you can put that by a window. And if you have an exterior door, you can put one on each side, because that's likely where the spiders will get caught, because that's likely where the insects or prey are going to be coming in. And then when you check on your glue board, you know, make sure that you look at it, and if all your spiders are on the one side and your exterior door is right close, then you know that there's a gap underneath there that you will want to try to eliminate. And we can also use things like, let me get those, weather stripping. So when you've got those gaps, if it's a hole or something, you can use for around utilities, you can use like caulking or sealant or some kind of way to seal up those holes. If you have screens that need to be fixed, please get those fixed. And then there are lots of different types of window seals. There are different attachments and installments that you could put under your door if you've got a gap, so that they can't crawl under. So we've got like foam tape. So there's different ways to weather strip so that you can keep those spiders outside. Most common spiders that will get inside are going to be those wolf spiders, because they crawl right under the door, and that's why weather stripping is a good idea. When it comes to being on the outside of your home, you may want to use something like a spider brush. So it just is an attachment that goes on the end of like a mop or a broom, and you go around and you just go in the twirling motion, and these little bristles, and they're long, they'll get in and around all like the siding and around the lights, and it's very soft, so it won't ruin, you know, the plants or the building or the structure or anything on the outside of the features, but it'll knock down those webs and get those spiders out. And if you annoy them enough, maybe they'll leave. But with spiders, they're also going to be where the prey is. So how do we get prey to our house? We leave our lights on sometimes. So we want to also make sure you turn your lights off at night or when you don't need them, so you're not attracting the insects to your house that spiders feed on. And you know, cleaning up leaf litter is always going to be good for that too, because a lot of spiders hang out in the leaf litter or around clutter or under flower pots and in the mulch. So that's something that you can clean up as well. Let's see. If you don't have an entomologist in your home and you see a spider, what do? Well, if it's on the floor or on the wall, the best thing to do is use the cup method. And most entomologists are familiar with that, because that's how we collect a lot of our specimens in good shape. So what you want to do is get a cup. Anything will do, but I prefer a clear one so I know where the spider is. And sometimes it may take a couple tries, and sometimes a couple legs will get lost, but more times or not, you're going to be quick and you're going to cover that spider. You want to get something like cardstock that's hard, you know, get something out of the recycle bin that is, you know, not important to you, and you slip that gently underneath the spider. And then what you do is make sure it's secured, and you go and you take that outside far, a little bit from your, you know, where there's no gaps around your house, and then you go and you can release it. And that's how you can get rid of a spider. You can also do that when it's on the wall or anywhere else that you find it. But if you do that, people will think you're super brave. Some people are worried about spider bites. Spiders do not bite unless they need to defend themselves. The most common ways that people do experience spider bites is when they've got a spider that's crawled into their shoe or into their clothing, and then it's put on and pressed tightly against their skin, or if they were on the floor and they rolled over a spider. So what you want to do to make sure that doesn't happen, especially if you have a lot of spiders in your home, is that you shake out your boots and your garden gloves before you go put them on if they've been there for a long time. And also just make sure that you continue to vacuum regularly and clean those corners and nooks and crannies in your house that you maybe don't do often enough. But that's what I have to say about spiders today, and if you have any more questions, please be sure to contact your local extension office. Thank you very much.